Before we start, I just want to say that I have filmed and deleted this video 3 times now because I am aware of the backlash that I am going to receive when I post it. However, I've really thought about it and I decided to film it for 2 reasons. One is because it was a requested video by one of my viewers and I always try and film videos that you guys have asked for. And the other is because I think it's a really important subject that nobody else is really talking about. So I'm going to film it. Please don't rip me to shreds in the comments. So first of all, I want to tell you a little bit about my breastfeeding or non-breastfeeding story. So I fully intended to breastfeed. I bought all the kit. I bought a manual breast pump. I bought an electronic breast pump, nipple shield things, the whole 9 yards. I did buy 1 can of formula and 2 ready to drinks, just as a backup in case anything happens. And something did happen, so I'm glad that I bought those. So I was quite open to it and I wanted to try it. I understood it was the best nutrition for my baby, but I was quite easygoing about if it worked, it worked. If it didn't, it didn't. That was pretty much where I was. And then I went into labour. If you've seen my labour and delivery story, I'll link it down below. Basically, I was in labour for a really long time. 56 hours in total, having a contraction every 2.5 minutes at least. And then at the end of my labour, I had a terrible reaction to the injection they give you to deliver the placenta. And I was kind of much out of it for about, I'd say 4 to 5 hours. I got an incredibly intense headache where I couldn't open my eyes. I was projectile vomiting, lost a lot of blood. So that was pretty grim. So that thing of that golden hour that I'd requested and then your baby will nuzzle up and start feeding, I didn't have any of that. And when I came to, Paul had fed Finn and dressed him because he was hungry. So he was already feeding him with a bottle of formula, and in my mind that kind of triggered the first bit of worry. So as soon as I got back down to the ward while Paul still was there, I did try and feed the baby, breastfeed him. I didn't know if I was doing it right, so I called for the midwife on the buzzer. Eventually, after about 15 minutes, somebody came. I was in a very busy ward. There was 5 other ladies with their babies and their families between us with a curtain. It was an incredibly busy ward. And this midwife arrived and she was great. And she did what they do, is like thrust the baby onto your boob in a way that looks really aggressive, but I'm sure it's not. It's just the way that you do it. And after a while, I presumed he was feeding. Now, you don't really know that first day because your milk hasn't come in, so all they're really getting is the colostrum. So you're not really sure whether you're doing it all right or not, or how long you should do it for, or if they let go, or you should pull them off, or if you should move to the other boob. And she was great in putting him on, but then she had to go because she was busy, and I completely understand that. And then again, the next time, I didn't really know when he was hungry, but after 2 hours, because I was very set on that, like, right, every 2 hours I must feed him, I rang the buzzer again. And this time it took about 25 minutes for somebody to come. And when she came, she seemed a little bit irritated about the fact that I'd pressed the buzzer. I think they were fine in the first couple of hours after I came back from the labour ward, but after that they were kind of like, just go to the nurse's station to ask someone. But very often when we went to the nurse's station, there wasn't anyone there. So again, she helped me get him to latch on and then left swiftly after. And it was getting around the time that Paul was going to have to go home. And I was just panicked because I felt completely shell-shocked. I felt completely out of my depth. I felt like the rug had been pulled from under me in terms of how my birth had gone. It had not gone anywhere near how I thought it was going to be. It was so much more dramatic and violent and intrusive and intense than I could ever have imagined. And I just didn't have any confidence in my ability, both physically and mentally, to feed that baby correctly overnight on my own. Like, I think this is a massive thing in that you have gone through that birth, and even if it's a short birth, even if it's a 6-hour birth, which is a quick birth to some people, you are so exhausted, you are so spent, you are so shell-shocked to then have to look after this tiny human being that you've never met before and you don't know what you should be doing as a first-time mum and how often they should be feeding and if you should let them sleep or if you should wake them and anything like that. It's a massive undertaking for a new mum in those first couple of days and those first couple of hours. So for Paul to be going home at that stage, I was just panicked. And so what I said to him was, go and get me the ready to drinks out of the bag. Overnight, I'm going to feed him formula. because I knew how to feed a baby formula. I'd fed other children formula. I had godchildren that I'd fed formula. And that is what I had the confidence in my ability to do. I knew that I could pour that formula into a bottle and feed him. I knew how much he would be getting. I knew that I'd be doing it correctly. All of those things were running through my mind at that moment, and that's just what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be able to look after him, and I was so panicked that I wouldn't be able to. So that's what I did. I fed him formula overnight, and then the next day, again, I tried a couple of times with the help of the midwives, but I just didn't feel confident, and I was second guessing myself constantly, thinking, oh, I've tried him on the boob, but I don't think he's got anything, so I'm just going to give him this bottle of formula. And then also what was running through my mind was, but I've given him a bottle, so now I can't give him the boob because he'll get confused, and then what if he doesn't feed from anything? All of that mixed advice and guidance that you get before you have a baby, I just didn't know what to do. And so the safest thing for me, and the best thing that I could do for my baby at that time in my head, was to feed him formula. So that is my story. That said, I want to say a couple of things about breastfeeding. I know, one, breastfeeding is undoubtedly the best nutrition for your baby. I'm not disputing that at all. Two, I have several friends who have found breastfeeding a lovely, bonding, wonderful experience, and they wouldn't change it for the world. Three, if you have made the decisions based on the fact that you love your baby and you want to do the best for them, it doesn't matter if you feed your baby with your breasts or with a bottle. As long as your baby is fed, that is all that matters. And I am not judging any mum who makes that decision for any reason whatsoever. But the conversation that I think needs to be had, and what I would like to say, is that breastfeeding can be incredibly hard. Some people, their babies latch on and they find it absolutely easy and wonderful from day dot. Some people have that initial bleeding or initial discomfort, and then they ride through that after a couple of weeks and they find it wonderful and they're really glad that they've done that. I'm not talking about those people. What I'm talking about is new mums, specifically first-time mums, in a state of emotional distress following a traumatic birth or a birth that they didn't expect, exhausted new mums, then having to take on that physical and emotional responsibility of being the only person who can look after and feed that baby. So on the third night that we came home after 2 nights in the hospital, Paul's mum came and sat downstairs with the baby all night and let us go for a sleep. And so we had 12 hours sleep. And honestly, that is the best thing that anyone has ever done for me. And I was only able to do that because I didn't breastfeed, because Paul's mum could feed him with a bottle, so she didn't have to wake me up to feed every couple of hours. And what I want people to think about and talk about is how much of a physical toll breastfeeding takes on your body, in that the expectation is that only you can feed that baby at that point. And that is a massive, massive weight on your shoulders. To a certain extent, partners even can't help you with that. And I think I've heard a lot of men talk about a feeling of helplessness in that they haven't got the boobs, so they can't do the job. And I think those are things that we kind of need to talk about and consider. After making my decision to bottle feed, I was on a couple of occasions shamed, specifically by sort of health visitor type people. There was one occasion where we were going on holiday and I'd asked the health visitor what the best way was to carry bottles through the airports. And the lady sort of looked at me and said, well, this is why you should have breastfed. And at that point, I found it really difficult to sort of stomach, because she didn't know my story. She didn't know if I was physically unable to breastfeed. And I think that's something that we need to consider as well. Finn is very rarely ill, but when he is, I think it's because I didn't breastfeed. And that guilt is put on us by this societal thing that we must breastfeed, no matter what the cost, no matter the physical or mental or emotional implications to the mother. You must breastfeed because that is the best thing to do for your baby. And what I want to say is, at what cost? I was a better mother to Finn because I wasn't emotionally stable enough to undertake that breastfeeding journey, and I made the decision that I wasn't going to put myself under that strain. And I can categorically, just from my own experience, say that I was more present, I recovered faster because I'd made that decision and I was fine with that decision. So yes, breast is breast. Yes, women should endeavour to try to breastfeed their baby, but if they feel physically or emotionally unable to do so, then that is also fine. And what we shouldn't be is penalised in Boots by not getting Advantage card points for expensive tins of £10 formula because the government want us to breastfeed. That shouldn't be a thing. We shouldn't be penalised. We are all feeding our children, and that is absolutely fine. Every decision made by every individual woman is fine. And I think we need to talk about this. We need to say this to new mums before they have their babies. You might have a traumatic birth and you might find that you make the decision not to breastfeed, and that is okay too. You might find that you start breastfeeding and it becomes really difficult and you decide that you want to give up, and that is okay. Or it might be that you need more support in those packed wards in those first initial hours. If I'd have had someone to come and help teach me and support me on a one-to-one basis more than a quick 5 minutes after ringing a buzzer, I might have continued to breastfeed. That is okay. We just need to start having this conversation. So that's my story. Please comment down below if you want to contribute to this discussion. Like I said, I would really appreciate it if you didn't blast me in the comments. I'm not passing judgment on anyone, and I hope that nobody would pass judgment on me for my perspective on it. It is simply a conversation about women's mental health after they've had a baby and the physical implications of being solely responsible for that human being after 9 months of being responsible for that human being. I also think there needs to be clarity around whether you can combination feed, whether you can express, and I think there needs to be more flexibility around that, because speaking to midwives and health visitors after I'd made that decision, they were kind of more open to those possibilities, and I don't feel like that conversation is had before you have your baby. I feel like it's quite cut and dry what the rules are. So that's it. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next week. Bye.